Kia ora, talofa. Thank you for watching. My name's Trina. This is my beautiful sister Louise, and today we'll be talking about our mum, growing up with a mum that had a severe mental illness. So I think we could talk about, or start talking about when the earliest memories that we had of mum, not being quite right, or when you recognise that.
Yeah, that she wasn't what people would call normal. I actually think going back to my first memory of it was witnessing our mother doing something outside that wasn't quite normal, and yelling at our neighbours. I don't know if you remember, I was walking home from school. And I have to say I must have been about 7 or 8. And in all honesty, I feel like you were there, but then I can't actually remember. I just remember walking down our street to our family home, and our mum was yelling at our neighbours and doing stuff that wasn't the norm, and running around our house screaming and carrying on, and the police were called, and she was arrested in front of us, and that was probably one of my first memories of something huge like that that's happened, because we always knew Mum to talk to herself. But for me, like looking back, I thought that was normal.
Yeah.
I didn't think that wasn't normal.
Yeah. I think for myself, yes, of course I have memories of Mum just having extreme episodes, but probably the undertone of Mum wasn't as normal as other mums was. At kindy, it was probably either my 4th or 5th birthday, and when your mum or dad brings in the cake to share with the class. And I remember sitting at the table and Mum sitting there, but she's like physically there, but she's so blank, so the cake's there, everybody's doing what you would do at a kindy birthday, but Mum is just like stone. She's like a statue, just and there's nothing going on
looking
behind.
into space almost.
And I don't recall the teachers saying, "Oh, you okay?" Maybe they probably knew Mum was a bit off. And because that would have been very early 80s when we were at kindy. So that's kind of that feeling that I had, that it wasn't shame, it was more like, oh, Mum's gone quiet. So I think probably I may have, been even more close to her, to just watch her, to see her next move, even at a really young age. But definitely there were always things Mum was doing, had done that was, that could be probably passed off as eccentric. We'd come home from school. Remember, we'd be primary school. We had a beautiful home in Flaxmere, and Mum was really, really house proud. Dad was gone already. And we'd come home. Would you remember in the lounge? We'd have toys. Every family has toys for the kids. But Mum had lined them all up. She'd lined them all up like beautifully. I remember we had an indoor plastic hopscotch. Can you remember that?
I remember
blue
that.
And white.
Yeah, I remember that with the colours.
Yes, and it was down the middle of the lounge, and then all of our toys would be, I don't know, ready for us to play.
But I don't remember
at a young age, I'd kind of think, I could tell she'd cleaned, because you always knew when the house was, it was never untidy, but you could tell she'd had a thorough spring clean, and part of that was organising our toys for us. But I used to think it's kind of the opposite of what would normally happen in a home. The toys would be put away. And she'd have them out. So I used to think that was a bit odd, but that was probably mild.
Totally. There's lots of memories I have of
just things being a little bit different.
A little bit different. And I guess as we're getting older, like primary school, we noticed a lot more, because Mum was a real hard worker. So her and the grandparents and the auntie and the uncle would go out, and they would go to asparagus picking or all of that sort of thing. And then, come payday, they would come into the school or mum would, and come and bring our lunch and stuff, and I'd be so embarrassed that mum would do that. But because I think everybody was quite aware of how different mum was. And then, with primary school, I was like, what's wrong? Like, I started to think, oh, okay, this isn't normal.
Yeah, she would have an outburst, like if I think about her in the school office or down at the shop at the checkout, and she could blow up if something, say like it was $5, but she believed it was $4.50. So something like that couldn't be explained to her. So we learned how to kind of step away, quite quickly. Like, and even now, I can admit, I'd leave mum to it.
I would too. I'd do it on the bus. Like, we'd go on the town bus to town, and we'd leave her in one seat, and we'd sit all the way at the back. And it's like,
because you never knew when
she was going to explode or talk to herself, and like talking to the devil and all of that sort of thing. And what's funny is that because we grew up with all of that, there was one day where we'd lose a tooth. Yeah. And she wouldn't put it under our pillow.
Yeah.
She'd throw it on the roof.
Yeah.
And I used to think, why are you throwing it on the roof? I thought it was just one of her...
Another wacky thing.
Yeah, wacky things that she does. And then it wasn't until much later on I learned that it can be a Samoan tradition that you throw it on the roof. And I'm like, here I am thinking my mum is crazy. And so it was really hard
to differentiate what was like what culture, was real what culture, was going on in your mind. Because another thing too, because we grew up in a Samoan household, and there were all sorts of things around. You covered the glass mirrors, you covered the TV screen. You covered,
I thought that was her mental illness.
But actually it was part of the culture. So, and then speaking on a family level, there was big... we were ostracised hugely because of mum's mental illness.
With family, with church. Mum was very into the church.
Yeah, friends.
Friends. And then I even, there were even times where as we got a little bit older, I remember saying to mum, they're just using you, mum. They're using you. Like, there was a point there where one family were trying to get her to sign some money out of our house to help them. Yeah. And it was like, don't do it, mum.
Yeah, I recall that we had, and it wasn't until as we got older and realising what the visits were about when community people would come in the home. And I remember I probably was about 14 or 15 doing the dishes, and a whole group of ladies came into the home, and then I realised what they were doing, and then I spoke up, and I wasn't really nice, and mum was really embarrassed, and no, it's okay, but the women, because they knew what they were doing, they stepped away. And not one time after that did it happen again. So we were very, very lucky that they honoured those loans, because our home was being put up as collateral. So we didn't know that.
No,
growing up.
Not at all. And I think one of my memories, like finding out why mum, every time she did get arrested, it wasn't often, but when they did arrest her, they'd put her into the hospital. And I remember just asking the question, why was she arrested? This time it wasn't at home. They took her from Waddies, where she worked in Waddies, and we were told that she spat in something, and they arrested her. But she was having some sort of episode. Now that we look back, and they arrested her and put her in this in the mental hospital. And I remember visiting. Do you remember visiting?
Yeah, I can recall. It would have been one of those times she was taken in, and they would have been with the Pacifica Health team, because I still recognise some of the people now. Yeah. And they came over home to do an assessment, and I just remember, being that little and probably just sitting on the floor, and then Dad was called. Oh. Yeah, I recall Dad being there, because that was unusual too. Yeah. And then them trying to probably work out where you and I we're
going to go.
Yeah, and it was always with Auntie.
Yeah. And I just remember walking into this hospital, and it was this long corridor, and I remember Mum, she was in a side room the first time, and she was so drugged up, like so not herself. And I remember being really scared, and I remember the smell of the unit. and going through this dining area, because it was a huge dining area, and then Mum would take us for a tour, and she was so happy to see us because we were her babies, and like through everything in her life, all her hardships, we were her number ones, and she always wanted to make sure that we were taken care of. And I just remember going through, and it was like she knew she was there for a while, so she was trying to make us comfortable, and she was like, here's the gymnasium, and I was just like, just that smell stayed with me. And it wasn't until years later, when you and I had to make that tough call to put her back in there, and I mean years later, we're like in our 20s now, not 7, that smell was still that same smell when I walked through that corridor, and it brought back so many memories of that time. And I thought, nothing's changed.
No, I do recall, going to visit Mum at the unit, but I think I just remember, once again, Dad having to take us there, and then probably being in the meeting room to spend time with her, because I believe that was the last time she was taken in, and she self-discharged herself and made it home to us.
Yes.
And then that was it. There was no more service around her. No one came to check
up on us.
So we had kind of muddled our way through life throughout our whole young lives with Mum, and somehow she had managed to put us through school, tried to work the jobs that she could hold down. But I do remember being a Samoan family, and the awareness around mental health is not, back then, was nearly zilch.
So on that, do you remember Grandma and Grandpa, they decided that, or more Grandma, we were going to try and do it the island way. And so they had found a doctor for Mum in Auckland to see. And so I'm thinking we were around 8, possibly. Could have been younger, but we packed everything up. The house we still had our house, but we packed everything up, and we drove to Auckland, and we went to stay with a Samoan family there, and they were trying to get Mum in to see this special doctor to see what was wrong with her. And I remember we were walking down this Auckland street. I remember going past these flowers, real strong, prominent smell, and Mum was trying to get us into the St Mary's Catholic school in Auckland. But and then she was saying she's got to see this doctor that will make her better, and we need to do this. Because I was so upset that we got taken away from our friends here and going to Auckland and doing all of this. And then she couldn't get us into the church, but she had into the school, but she had to stay. Like it must have been a good few months to see this doctor. So we got put into Rosebank Primary School.
Did we stay?
Yeah, so we did. We got put into Rosebank Primary School. And I remember it just being at the end of the street from the house where we were staying. And such a lovely family. I remember taking us in, and they must have been family to Mum.
Yep.
And I remember Grandpa always picking us up at the end of the street. He'd always be waiting at the end of the street when we finished school. And I just remember being so nervous going into the classroom because we were new.
Yeah.
I think it must have been the middle of a school year. It wasn't the beginning. And then I just remember being so upset that, we didn't know anybody, and you were separated from me as well. And so that was hard because we were never separated. And then all of a sudden, I think we must have been there only 2 or 3 weeks, and then they were taking us out of the school after we'd just made friends and stuff. And I found that really difficult. And I remember asking questions, well, where are we going now? And, and I still to this day don't know what had happened with this doctor. But obviously it didn't help Mum.
No, I always remember there were massage like sessions, prayers. That was always something that was.
And the Samoan, the waving of a leaf over her. Do you remember that? And tapping on her.
And it was something, we were always exposed to. It wasn't like Mum was taken away and they tried to do these things. It was right in front of us. I don't know if that was a good thing, because I remember seeing Mum just so, distressed, and I think it was done out of love. Like I do believe the family were trying to heal her in the way that they thought was going to help, and maybe it did, maybe it didn't. And so that was when we were quite young, and then throughout living with Mum at home, we would, I knew I could definitely feel when an episode was coming on. It didn't take much. It was like a light switch.
I think as we were growing up with school and stuff, we never had our friends come over.
No.
Because of the episodes that Mum would have. We did start to get quite embarrassed about her behaviour and learned that it wasn't normal.
No.
And so, yes.
I had one particular friend that I knew there was no issues.
You didn't have to worry.
No, and because when I look back, sadly, she had such a horrendous childhood in her own home.
Yeah.
She would always be like, no, it's okay.
Yeah.
But that's how bad her own home life was.
Yeah.
It didn't matter that our mum was, going, nutting off, crazy talk. It was better than what was going on in her own home.
Yeah.
And I just thought, oh my gosh. So,
mine was quite opposite. Like my best friend at primary, and intermediate, she came from a well-to-do family, and I spent a lot of time with her family because of what was going on in our home. But I remember feeling so close with her that I knew it would be okay to bring her home. So I just brought her to stay the night.
And Mum was always good with her.
Yeah,
She just adored
and her parents were amazing. And like, I let that guard down, and she was the only friend in that time that I allowed to see our real world.
Yeah, I tried to. Do you remember when it was the parent-teacher interviews and you had to book in times? I always tried to get after school time, so no one else would be at school.
I would be the same, like close to the end.
Wasn't it always the way Mum always behaved when we went to all that trouble, and then you... And then if it was like an impromptu thing, and she
knew where to put that,
But if we
put it on,
we did all sorts of things to try and reduce the attention that she received, and then she would normally be normal. So
I mean, growing up in Flaxmere, close-knit community, everybody knew that Mum was mentally unstable. Now back then, I feel like she was probably one of the first that was prominently out there,
she was.
She was the only one, not like now where we see, different types of mental health in our streets and all that. She was the only one
that I can recall. Yeah.
And we used to have kids going up and down our street abusing and yelling at us.
Antagonising.
And I remember getting bullied. Walking home from school one day, they grabbed all my books and threw them down the drain down our street, and all of that. And I think that was probably the only time that I really thought, I wish I didn't have a crazy mum.
Yeah. I always dreaded when someone would say, "Oh, I saw your mum." Because it was generally going to be she was doing this. And because she didn't only have her, mental health battles, she looked different too. She was like 5 foot nothing, really
loved
fair.
To make her own bright coloured everything, and
that's why I think like her eccentricities, and I think she was a pure genius too. She could sew. She could sew everything from scratch, like top to toe for us and herself. She could cook like just such intricate meals. When I think back,
she did all the baking for the galas.
Could, play guitar. There was just so many things. And her gardening skills were next level.
Sing. So, like we did grow up with all of those beautiful things, and she rubbed off on us. And
we just had to kind of see all of that through just that real tough life that we
had. And I as we got older, I remember finding the letters from my godparents.
Oh,
Because
okay.
there was that time they came to visit us, and Mum was working. Oh, was she working or was she in the unit? I can't remember. But we were home alone.
Oh, okay.
And they came and they grabbed us and took us to dinner while we were waiting for somebody to come home. And I remember thinking this was awesome because they took us to like a few different places.
Yeah,
like
all in
Pizza
one
Hut.
evening.
Yeah. KFC. God, I was thinking, I think back and I was like, did we look like we were starving?
Probably.
Like, you know. But I remember finding the letter in Mum's cabinet. She had a glass cabinet in the kitchen. And Mum had hidden it, and I remember her reading it, and she was crying, and then she put it away, and she didn't talk to any of us about it. And then I found it, and it was my godparents asking if they could take me for good to help. They wanted to try and help and ease the burden, and they wanted to take me away. And I quite often think if Mum had let them, my life would be so different. Like, you know, they lived in Auckland, and it would have been so different. And they are. Well, my godfather's passed now, amazing man, and my godmother, amazing lady. But yeah, I don't know what I think I remember reading it thinking, what about, I want my sister to come with me. I'm not going by myself. And then I said to Mum that I'd found the letter. I'm not going by myself. Mum said, oh, no, you're not going, But there were so many people trying to help. But I don't think anyone really knew where to go to get the proper.
And because Mum was, she could just scream the house down.
Yes.
She was very frightening. I remember we would have been in our early 20s just before we had to call up the emergency mental health, and I remember we went to Auntie, so we went to Mum's sister who lived in Flaxmere, and we're just begging her for help because it was getting to crisis point. And I remember Auntie came over, and we I think we were outside maybe in the car, and she'd gone into the house, or I have this memory in my head. I couldn't see her from in the kitchen window, and I'm outside, or I can hear her and Mum, and they're just going hammer and tongs.
I think I remember.
And Auntie just had to leave. And when I think back, of course, to go in and talk to her sister, and you're going to talk to your sister about how mentally unwell you are, that's not going to go down, because Mum never ever like to be termed like that. If you tried to say you're sick, you're this, and it would just send her. So,
but I think we knew at that point, like with Mum's episodes, they didn't really harm anybody. Yeah. But it was getting to the point where we had our own children, and it was starting to
and just some nasty comments, and. Because she wasn't medicated, Mum never. She was a chain smoker.
Yep.
So that was probably her vice. Didn't gamble. Didn't really actually have a social life. I remember she would go to try and be a part of the community events in Flaxmere with Samoans, and she'd always make a good go of it. But if we attended too, I could definitely feel those backhanded compliments. And that always made me feel ashamed or embarrassed, and made me want to stay away too.
And out of place, like not belonging.
Yeah.
I felt a lot of that when Mum would try and take us to the Samoan church or weddings. And then sometimes I got that look where, don't you feel sorry for them? Look. But just as an adult now, like even in my 20s, I just remember thinking, Auntie and Uncle helped us tried to help
and I'm sure,
so much.
Looking back now, how upsetting it was for them to actually walk away and think, because we're adults now, and we would do that too. Like, you would just exhaust every time to try to help or intervene or be there for the children, but then there's a time when you have to step away. So of course we do not ever resent them or anything like that. It's like, I get it, I understand.
I if anything, is like, oh my God, you guys, we would run to your house in the middle of the night, like, and you had your own family to deal with, and then here you are taking us in and just trying to help us. And definitely no resentment there. I think if anything, it's much like today, right? There's a need for people to help with mental health and mental illness, but there's just no answers. There's no
it's
real support.
Yeah, that can,
I feel.
Yeah, or that stays in place.
That stays, yeah.
And it's really hard to, like, looking back, if a teacher at school had approached me or something like that, I don't know if I would have said anything out of turn or shared anything, because we were so used to managing mum in a way that, you know, we could kind of get on. She definitely knew how to, you know, pay the bills, all those kind of things.
Yeah,
it's not
definitely.
like, you know, she was squandering money or she was doing a
worked
really good
hard
job
to pay.
Yeah, so I think that's why
everything.
she could kind of move through life without, like, us getting taken from her or the house getting sold out from underneath her.
And that's what I do think about now, though. Yeah, she did do all of that.
Yeah.
Because in today's society, right, if somebody was as extreme as mum, we would be put into OT straight away.
Yeah, I remember when we finally did go through that route at the mental unit with mum, and they assessed her and they said to us, we don't know how you guys have managed to
live your whole life
with mum in the state that she was.
Yeah.
So,
and being diagnosed too with, at that point, that was the first time I actually heard a diagnosis, because usually we weren't in the meetings.
No, I don't
when we were little. I don't recall any of that. So manic depression, bipolar, and schizophrenia. Yeah. Those are three serious diagnoses for one person to have. And she's had it the whole way through our life.
Yeah.
And
like, I
remember
remember
makes me really sad.
Talking to Uncle, her brother, who's now passed on, but he said even over in the islands there was stories that, you know, there was someone that had wanted to put a curse over her, and then that was carried on, you know, that was something that was known. When I have talked to Dad, he has said Mum was always like that, you know, so I don't know, was she, you know, or he had said she wasn't 100% like normal. There was always something probably quirky about her that you could, you know, and from what we believe, when Mum and Dad separated her, she had a breakdown, so that would have exacerbated all of that. So,
and then of being a solo mum with the mortgage, having to bring up two little ones, and two, Mum was very, very religious.
Yeah.
And so putting us through a private Catholic school as well. I remember going to the public school for such a short time, but I think because everybody knew her in our family, I was bullied, and I begged her not to go back.
Yeah.
And then we were put into St. Mary's, which was
I think there was probably a lot more tolerance and understanding. I never recall anybody, like, definitely not a parent or a teacher, you know, undermining Mum. It was just kind of like school? A quiet, okay, you know, these girls are going through this, and then moving on to high school, of course, that community didn't know us, and then we didn't need Mum as much at high school, so you know,
and we did go off and do our own thing quite early. Yeah,
and I think like relationships wise, you don't know what's going on in your friends' home and like your boyfriends and girlfriends' homes. So when, you know, I had, you know, my partner, my children's father, and he met Mum, so he was Samoan and definitely used to chaos, you know, definitely used to dysfunctioning, functional family. So his understanding and acceptance of Mum was okay. I didn't have to explain anything. He understood kind of how it would be, so that was easy in that sense. But friendships wise, still had kind of the same friends. They were all quite respectful of Mum. Mum probably, you know, turned her nose her nose up at some of them, but would kind of be like, oh, Mum, you know, and you could have a laugh with Mum too.
Oh, you could, like, and like with my relationships with friends and that, it was I did explain things a little bit before they came into the home. Yeah,
because our Mum's like quirky behaviours that ended up being quite extreme and distressing. She spat.
Yes.
So that was something.
That was an embarrassing thing for me. Yeah. Like I couldn't even deal with it myself. So I'm like, how do I expect anybody else to come into our lives and be okay
and it
with
wasn't
that?
just a, like you just spit to the side. It was it was like a really violent thing that she did to expel it from her own body.
That's how what I thought she was doing. In her mind, she was like, I need to get it out.
And so she'd have a rag.
Yeah.
And then she would have a bag. I know when you look back at it.
I know. I can envision everything now, and I can just feel embarrassed now talking about
That's why I knew if we went somewhere with her, you had to kind of like assess the environment.
Yeah.
Like, is there a way she can go
outside?
Has she got a jacket on that's got in her pocket?
Rag.
Yes. Yeah. So there were just so many things that...
God, we were overthinking things at such a young age.
And I admit I used to, because I stayed in the family home longer than you.
Yeah.
And when it was time for the kiddies' birthdays... I look back now and I think, oh man, the amount of things that I used to try to organise so Mum wouldn't be there. Like, she would be part of the celebrations in some way, but at the huge part of the day, I would even say, Mum, Louise needs her gardens done, and she'd go yes, I feel so bad, but I just couldn't cope with.
I understand that. I do get that.
And Mum was just so good because she loved gardening. Of course, she loved you,
and she'd walk across the park with her hoe and her rake.
Yeah, we were so naughty. We would have the party finished in the time
by the time she got back,
and she wouldn't know.
I didn't know you did that.
Yeah, I was so. There were things like that. Yeah, but I don't know if we. Did like me myself take advantage of her? Probably in some ways, like...
Oh, I did with things like going out, staying out.
Yeah.
Like, Mum
it was easy.
She cared, but she didn't like other parents. It was like, where are you going to be? What time are you going to be home?
You could tell a lie just like that. And she would just believe us, and I'm sure she knew we were up to no good. But if you said, "Oh, I'm going to stay at Amy's house tonight,"
she'd
Mum,
be like, okay. And then I remember getting caught. I went with a friend. We were third form. Might have been, third form, I'm sure. And I said I was going to stay at her place, and she said she was going to stay at mine. And we went to this party, and her mum caught us. And I was like, oh my God, we're in so much trouble. And then I was like, oh, actually, I'm not really in that much trouble. And her mum dropped us off at the house. I can't even remember if her mum talked to Mum, but I just remember walking in and going, hey, Mum. And that was the end of that. And then the other time, remember when I started smoking? Well, when Mum found, the way Mum found out I was smoking, I was like, I was sick of hiding it. So I sat at the table because Mum was a smoker and she was rolling her smokes. And I was like, hey, Mum, can I have one of those? She was just like...
No, and then didn't she? She was quite accepting of it, wasn't she?
She was.
And then you could buy her
smokes. I could buy her smokes, and then she was borrowing smokes off me. So, that was probably... 14, 15.
I think she was very lenient on us. Didn't quite discipline us to the way that you would think you would be, because she didn't have, it was just her. Yeah. And she just loved us so much.
She did. I mean, the way she disciplined us still made us bloody cry. Kneeling down in front of her saying, I'm sorry 100 times is enough to make you, I remember us just crying by the 100th time. Yeah. But, and I remember telling her I was pregnant.
Oh, yeah.
That was the only time she did not talk to me for 2 weeks. And I was getting quite upset about it because I'm like, but I see now out of everything that we put her through and did, and it wasn't a lot, we weren't really naughty. Yeah. That was probably one thing that she expected more from us, because she wanted more for our lives. Yeah. She wanted me to be a lawyer. Yeah. And, I just think I hurt her really bad, and she didn't talk to me for 2 weeks, and I was so hurt. But, she came around and we had her first moko, and she was amazing. But, just so loving, despite everything that was going on through her mind, just so loving and hardworking.
I have bumped into a few people that we grew up with, kind of like on, in our community, that were our age and from Samoan families, and then now when I bumped into them, they always just have really good things to say about Mum. Like I'm like, really? I didn't, and they'd just be like, no, your mum was always lovely, and probably because they would see her in that way, but we had her 24/7.
Yeah. And it must have been hard on Grandma and Grandpa, right?
Yeah, trying to actually understand. Because I knew the frustration was there. You would hear, you'd hear the fights, and because he's talking Samoan, you'd know kind of...
you got the gist.
Yeah, and I think
some of the,
they were just frustrated because Mum wouldn't snap out of it,
and
it
was a constant.
Yeah. So I think, thinking about Mum, though, like when they say, did you ever know who to be without, the illness or... But there were plenty of times when she was just herself, and you could always feel it. Like you'd walk in and dinner would be cooking. She'd be,
when she sings, she was in a happy place.
Yep.
When she was bathing the kids or doing things with the kids, she was in her zone, happy place. But
I don't think, I don't ever recall talking to her about being unwell. When the big, momentous time happened when I called the emergency mental health, and then part of that was they have to call the police.
Yes.
So I remember all of that happening, and it was, in the daytime, and I parked down.
Me.
Yeah, I had to ring you because it was at the end of it, and I parked down the road so I could see everything that was going on, and the police were called first, probably with the mental health team, and then I could hear Mum, and she was just screaming her head off, and the neighbours they were always good neighbours, and they knew us really well, and it was a house across the road, and they were calling out because Mum was being arrested, like physically arrested, and then they were saying leave her alone, and I just remember being in the car, just being beside myself watching Mum, that I had to get out of the car, and she was actually like sitting on the ground, not wanting to stand, being... They weren't
she's
dragging
resisting.
her.
That's what she was doing. She was like, "You are not taking me."
Exactly. And then I was just like, "Mum, just stand up." And then the only thing she said to me, she said, "Ina, bring my smokes." It's like, "Yes, Mum, I'll bring your smokes." And so that kind of changed, a big part of our lives. So she was, of course, put under the Act. Yep. So the minimum 1 to 2 months. And we went into the hospital, and it was so funny. So it was at the unit that was the original
unit. Yes.
Yeah. And you had to go in and, kind of have a supervised kind of visit. But before no, that's right. When we knocked on the door, and then they had to let us in. And so we're sitting there on our first visit with Mum,
Yeah, and it was in this outside in the smoking area with the greenery.
Yeah, and we watched other people, how they were kind of behaving in there. And they do this thing where they walk the whole length of the room, touch the door, and walk back. And we're just like, she thought they were crazy. Yeah. And then a few visits later, we went in and then, "See you, Mum." And we looked back in the window, and Mum's walking.
She's doing it, touching the door. I was like, oh my God. I actually remember asking her, "Mum, why were you doing this?" She goes, "Oh, it's so boring in here."
Yeah, that's right. So,
and she goes, "It's my exercise." And I was like, okay.
What was really sad too was, they have like their maximum or their, lockdown area, and somebody was knocking on the window to get our attention, and he was a neighbour of ours that had been there for, had been our neighbour for a long time, and just didn't know. Here we were in our own
and one
world.
of them was my husband now, his cousin.
Yes,
and
yes.
It was like, and he was like,
you just would never have known, that another whānau, like really close to us, were going through the same exact thing. Yeah. So I remember when Mum, they started to do, she could come home for a few hours and come home for the weekend, like leading up to a discharge. Yeah. And I remember I said to Mum, okay, this is what's going to happen. And then when she came home, there was just kind of hints of that old behaviour. And I, looking back now, of course, you're not going to wipe out 50 years of behaviour.
No, and because they've put her on medication now again. And so
she slowed right down.
Take all these meds.
And the side effects, I remember there was the dribbling, the weight gain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember Auntie came back into her life,
Yes.
and then they started going back to church, so you didn't smoke. So that was another great thing, that the smoking had stopped. But just the slowing right down, I don't think...
then I feel like the arthritis in her hands.
Yeah.
And getting older too.
Yeah, and keeping in mind, Mum was 56 when she passed. So when all of this happened, she's only a few years older than what we are now. So
I know.
Really
when
young,
you look at it,
really young.
And I just, I get really sad thinking about the way she died. And just, I remember saying, so Mum died of anaphylaxis in the end. She went to the doctors for the flu.
Yeah.
Got medication that reacted with her mental health meds, and passed that way. But I remember saying, you ringing us in the middle of the night, and we put all our kids in the car and came over, put all the kids in the room and came in where the ambulance medics were working on Mum. And I just remember being in the kitchen and just thinking about everything, our whole life. And Mum's life, and I do recall saying after a little while, just let her go. Yeah, she's had a hard life. Just please let her go.
I always believed too, Mum. Even though she was so young, that was just a shell of who she was. That wasn't who she should have been. For so many reasons, like if there was help earlier, if it was the right help, all those kind of things. Whether the understanding of our Samoan community, her family, whether all of those things could have made it a lot easier for her, but. That's where we were back then in the 80s and the 90s. It's. Hopefully we've come a little bit further, like with our own family, understanding or seeing it happening, with our own wider, whānau.
And community. Like I feel like, because there's so much of it out there, you do get those comments, and even sometimes from possibly our own children or partners, and I quite often remind them that you don't know somebody else's story, so don't judge.
And exactly.
They've got nobody, or they've left everybody that they've known because they don't want them to deal with that. So just be kind. That's all you need to do is just be kind, because nobody ever knew our backstory.
No.
And we would have loved to have had a whole lot more people on our side helping us.
I think going back to being when we were younger and growing up, and then when you get to go over to friends' homes, and that's probably when I did see how different our lives actually were. The whole family unit. I probably didn't know too many single parent families, but definitely didn't see what a family that mirrored ours. Never saw, never walked into a home and thought, oh, yep, that mum does what our mum does.
Our mum does, I mean, mine was so extreme at one point. I remember at high school doing athletics, and I ended up in the hospital. I had done the long jump, but jumped over the mat as well and fell on the ground. So they got the ambulance in, and I just remember my best friend's mum taking me or meeting me at the hospital, or like they were with me, and I went back to their place. I didn't go home. And I went back to their place, and I stayed with them for a few days. I didn't feel comfortable going home. And I look back on that now, and I just I don't know, I think it was I felt like they were able to take care of me better, because there was so much happening at home. Like it wasn't just Mum, it was other things. And I didn't want to stress Mum out by me being injured, having a back injury and having to stay at home.
And I suppose when you look at it now as a mother, you probably would have felt like for myself, probably left out or put out, you feel sad now, thinking Mum would be like, oh yes, no, she's the family are good that she's with, but really probably like, looking at herself, be home.
And it does hurt me that I did do that.
But that's just, when you're out of your usual environment, and on paper you're meant to say, yes, I'm going to go home because all this, everything will be in place, but when that is kind of taken away from you, you just go with it. You don't want to bring any more attention to yourself because they could possibly drop you off home and then see
everything else
the chaos that's
going
on.
Yeah.
So in a way, probably protective of, your own situation. Yeah, but I think definitely would protect Mum. Like if I could talk or be an adult, in our lives back then. Oh man, I would have just
self.
Yeah, I would have just totally probably just taken the situation. If I was an auntie of us or something, or a sister of Mum, I probably would have just stayed as close as I possibly could have to her to be around us a bit more and give, little girls a more normal homes, environment rather than...
Because often it was something would happen, we'd go to them, we'd come home, we're left to it.
Yeah. And
something would happen, and so there wasn't a constant. And... and that's no fault of their own. But yeah, sometimes it did make me feel like we were alone in everything. But it did make us grow up faster as well, I think.
Yeah, definitely, empathy and sympathy and all of those, quite adult, things trying to work through. But you definitely are more tolerant. Understanding
of mental health and other things,
and it pushes your level of what you can tolerate just right up there. You're just like, oh, is that it?
And I think when what we're going through is quite serious, right? And I quite often think that within home and everything that I've been through and at work. I do have a high tolerance of stuff because we have been brought up that way. Yeah. And I do have the empathy as well, where sometimes too much, where I should be a little bit more stern.
Yeah. You can be a bit harder because you're like, oh, well.
Yeah. But I quite often say that with everything that we went through with our beautiful mum, I am surprised we're not on drugs or alcoholics or gamblers. We have chosen. Mum did instill in us good values.
Yeah. Oh, she was. I always
because she
remember
had them herself.
Yeah, don't go and do that. She'd be good at saying, don't do this, that. But she couldn't back it up because we would just go off and do. Like she just wasn't really, really hard. It was easy to be naughty with her because she definitely would try to.
There
say
were no
to
repercussions.
Us, no, people, like what you said when you got caught partying. Yeah. Oh my gosh, what's your mum got to say? Not much. No, she's got enough things on her mind.
Oh my God. She got punished. But
I think sometimes when I think about funny moments with Mum, sometimes we would really take the mickey out of her. Like we could really, like sometimes if you and I don't know, if I wanted to play up or something and then I try and, but Mum, Louise did this, and then she'd fly off
the handle. And then I'm out of the dog box. But no, one of the funniest things I think of, like, Mum used to love dressing up on the dresses that she makes. So she'd be sitting there for days making her a dress, and then she'd be like, Isa, take my photo. And so she'd go into her room and she'd get dressed up, put her jewellery on and her makeup, and I would indulge her.
Yeah,
and I would take
the photos. Like I actually think there's probably a really good, case study on all of that behaviour.
Yes.
Like what do they say? It's that kind of grandeur thinking about yourself, because she did. Oh no, remember?
She loved to do it.
But Mum's big thing that she did, she changed her name by deed poll, remember?
Oh, yes, I thought that was a crazy thing of hers to do.
Yeah, very crazy, because nobody did that.
Learned that it wasn't.
Yeah, it was actually a family name, but it was, and if we did talk about it or pronounced it wrong, or Mum, you've just made it up, she would just go absolutely nuts.
Yes.
But it was actually a family name.
It was grandma's sister's family name, I'm sure, like on grandma's side. Mm-hmm. I remember like one of her whānau in America.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And it was their last name, and I was like, oh my God, when we learnt that she took that name because that auntie Mum had a lot of respect for, had taken her under her wing when Mum was younger, and in Mum's mind, she didn't want to be,
because she was a hunt by birth,
short by marriage,
and then on a CC
by depot.
And then we honoured that because we did put that on her gravestone.
We did. And I used to think, because she talked about Jackie Onassis all the time, so I used to think that that's where she got the name from.
Yeah, that Hollywood thing.
Yeah. And I was like, why are you changing your name to that? But Mum did a lot of things that to us didn't make sense, but to her made complete sense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I just remember, some of the things that she would do. Yeah, it would just be so eccentric and not at the right time of the day, not at the right time of the year, but she's out there just doing things. And she was very well known to be, a clown. Like you'll go to, events and she would be the first up there
to get dancing.
And I would be cringing, but it's all just part of her. It wasn't a put on. It was definitely.
She loved to.
She observed Samoan cultural traditions to the highest level. The old way that we would think, what are you doing? But then when I grew up and realised, no, this is actually a true way of doing things. We're just, we've been brought up, different. And so that kind of thing, when we'd have family come, and of course, you're just trying to turn everything on for your visitors. Yeah. To the point where, the food's leaving the house. There's no money left in the, it would go to extremes. So that kind of thing.
It's okay for us to be without, but as long as your visitors have got everything they need.
And Mum was somebody that wouldn't explain things. Very very stoic, and just probably that typical island mother of that time. I don't recall her being like a lovey, touchy, huggy, but I do remember I'd always sit close to her, physically. I think I slept in the same bed with her till I was 12, that kind of thing. But I do remember one time, because you'd never talk about boyfriends or anything to Mum, because of course she just wouldn't want to think of you like that. And I remember the children's father, and I was so young when we got together, and we couldn't be together for a certain amount of time. He was off doing what he needed to do, and that teenage love struck feeling. And I remember Mum was in the lounge on a mattress, and there was no one I could turn to. You were probably out.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. But I just remember I was just crying and so distraught because I just missed him so much. And I went to her and I didn't even have words. I just lay down on the mattress, and Mum was probably talking to herself, spitting in a bag. But that is how desperate I was. And so I went to her, and all she did, I lay down on her mattress, and she sat up, and then she let me have the mattress, and she just said, Ina, I'll make us some food.
Aww.
Yeah. So she knew without having me to say everything.
Anything.
She,
just needed her in that moment.
To be a mum.
And that was her loving way of...
Yeah. So she never observed our birthdays. Remember, you always
I organised my own birthday party one time, and I do remember one of my friends. He came over. He lived around the corner, and he came over, and I made bobbing for apples. And, because we didn't. We didn't have birthdays. But Christmases were.
Yeah, it was quite an island thing. There wasn't. You didn't talk about yourself like that. Had a big birthday for you, and because we were, poor.
Yes.
So that was something that if it was real guilty to try and do something for yourselves. And I recall going up to Mum and saying, "Mum, it's my birthday today." And she's like, "I'm this little girl, Mum," and she's like, "Oh, is it Ina?" So.
Oh, actually, do you remember Mum said, I brought you some drawers for your birthday? Do you remember that? Yeah. And we were so excited to come home.
Yeah.
And they were second-hand drawers.
But that was Mum through and through. Everything was op shop. Now it's vintage and
it's in now. But back then we were like, oh my God, we're going to get flash new drawers.
Run home.
And we did. And even she brought us some clothes, and then we'd get home and they were from the op shop.
Just so deflated.
But now,
but she was so generous.
She was.
I remember when they had the cyclone over in Samoa in the 80s, and she we had to gather everything, and all the donations went off in a big container, and that was huge for the community. But to Mum, it was like it's such a personal thing to do, and then we had never met our grandfather, her dad, and they had, whoever went over with all of the donations, done a video, a camcorder.
Yes,
do you remember?
I remember.
And then everyone,
and Uncle brought it back from Samoa for us to watch.
And then it was Granddad on on the video and just watching Mum and just cry. And then and then sometimes when I first heard about it, I thought, oh no, that's not Mum's dad. It's another one of who made up things. But it was when you listen to it. Yeah, and he was talking and he said her name and his name, and I just thought, it's hard now back then to kind of put together what was real or what wasn't. And then when we met our auntie in Samoa.
Yes, and she told us about the donation and how huge that was over there for them, and how
just
grateful.
meeting people that were in Mum's life when she was young, growing up, because and Dad's memories of Mum are far different to what we even knew. Because we'd never known them to be together. Yeah. So, when I think about all of those, and in 56 years, that's such a short lifetime, but she did a lot, Yeah. So, it's like how they say, oh, would you change things if you could? Yeah. Yes. Some things.
There are some.
Oh, my gosh.
Most definitely. I think one of them would be for Mum not to have such
severe
a hard life with the mental illness.
Yeah, I think when the psychologist or psychiatrist explained to us about her mental illness, and then how we said people used to pray for her and all of that kind of stuff, but when they explained it, like, there's just chemicals in the brain that aren't ever going. Yeah, that kind of was like a light bulb for me.
For me too. I was like,
holy fuck.
Oh my God, a chemical imbalance. Yeah. And it's medical.
Yeah, exactly. And she never, when she did come home and she stayed home, it was like sometimes I could see she wanted to talk to the voices, but she held it in because she knew if she did,
she'd go back.
Yeah, and that was kind of sad. And our whole lives, Mum had always either slept in the main room or when I had my family, she was started, or even before that, in the lounge.
In the lounge,
And so when she came home from the unit, I was like, Mum, now you've got to go into the lounge, because it had got into the point through with my children. Because she was just so volatile, we were nearly living in the room.
One room.
Yeah. When I look back, and so that was the starting point of, okay, this has to change. So when she came home, we set her up in your old bedroom. Yeah. And that was different, seeing Mum go off to a room and kind of like, oh, have your space. I don't know if she really agreed or wanted it to be like that, but probably like, okay. And so
we did ask her to move in with us at one stage, just to give you a little bit of reprieve from all of that. But Mum was quite protecting. She was your protector. She felt that she needed to be with you with everything else, and so we were okay with that. But I do often think that she probably would have needed it as much as you did, you know.
Exactly.
But it was her choice.
Yeah.
We weren't going to force her to come and live with us if where she wanted to be was with you and and the kids. So, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes when I do see adult women, and they're way older than us, and, you'll overhear them say they're going to their mum or they're spending time with their mum, and their mum must be 80 or 90 years old, and I think, holy, you get to still have your mum.
Yeah.
And because I was 25 when Mum passed, and that's really young, and when I think, holy, that's such a blessing.
It is, Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And, just yesterday, Delane and I were talking about somebody that we knew, who's an orphan.
Oh, yes.
I couldn't even imagine, yes, we've lost our mum, we've still got our dad, and we've got other people who have become
mother figures, father figures.
And even, which is amazing, we are very blessed, but yes, it's just that. Even though through all Mum's mental illness and that, she's, I would just absolutely have her back in a heartbeat.
Yeah. She was always,
like,
she was so emotional too, like, of course, with, you know, how she was extreme, but I always remember, say, if there was a news item and it would be about something horrendous about a child, she would literally just cry, and because she was always worried about us. She would. I have memories. You know, the library was my favourite place as a little girl, and it was far from home. Hey, we would walk from home all the way through 2 parks to get to the library, and I'd say to Mum, "I won't be long," and I would turn around and she would be following me. You know, she probably finished work, but I shouldn't have probably gone to the library walking on my own.
Yeah.
But that's how she was always just so scared for us that we'd say, "Oh, we're going to the river," back when you could.
Yes.
And she's like, "Oh no, please don't."
Yeah.
You know, everything was always
don't do that.
Yeah, a worry.
Yeah. That's probably why she took us picking with her all the time. Like 4 o'clock in the morning. Yeah.
No, we definitely did the tough times with you too. And there's some of those people, or they were kids when we were kids, and I see them now, and you know, they'll have memories of Mum. Yeah. And because we all of our parents worked hard. If you're out in the orchards way back in the 70s and 80s, we all kind of did it tough. So there's those memories, which is really heartwarming. But I think I'm sure Mum now, she always wanted us to be, you know, working, which
successful.
She
whatever
was
we're doing.
Far more grand about us. Like, I think Samoans are really good, or back in the day, skiting about each other's children. I would always be so embarrassed when she'd talk. You know, we'd just, I don't know, win just a normal school race or a normal something, and she'd make out it's just something so big.
It's the biggest thing. Like, I'd always do come first, and not always, but a lot of the time, swimming, sprints,
everything, and she would just be skiting about us.
The athletics, I remember you yelling at me when I was doing a race, and Mum must have come down. It was at Nelson Park, and I actually remember feeling really proud that Mum had come down at that moment, because I was proud of myself actually getting that far, and because Mum didn't really come to those things.
No, and there was a lot of like barriers too, like transport, work, and probably, I don't know whether she felt she was a part of the community, because our school galas were like huge.
Was in there.
And I always remember Mum would always go, you know, full hammer and tongs, baking up a storm, whatever she could create to donate, and she would run a stall. And I always used to be quietly proud when I'd see, and she'd always kind of run like the quiet stalls, like the ones no one would really go to, but I'm like, oh, hey Mum, you know, like other normal
the jumble
kids.
sale.
And then be a part of the you know, the post evening get together, and that always made me feel
at that time. That's when Charlie and the Chocolate Factory became a favourite of mine, but I remember her and her companion Ellen taking us, and
it just felt normal. I mean, there were many times when it would feel like it and it wouldn't turn out that way, but sometimes you would remember, oh cool, that went from start to finish how it was meant to. And I think that probably definitely for me, growing up, you always expected the worst.
Yes, and then if it didn't get to the worst, then it was a good day.
And as a little girl, just you never hoped for much, and it was probably a bad trait to have had embedded in you, like organically. But you couldn't not. You know, I don't think we could have undid that behaviour in ourselves, because it was just such a normal thing. You know,
and it's quite sad, because like, we didn't strive
it kind of
to
moved
think
into other areas of our lives.
We might be disappointed.
Yeah.
And for us, our little brains to think like that at such an early age, that just seems crazy to me now. Like, I don't think my 14-year-old now would even think that way. You know. Yeah. But I guess Mum definitely helped us with strengthening our own everything.
Like, I think the way we've explained her is really mild. Anybody that has, you know, a partner, child, you know, parent that has experienced such a, you know, huge level of disruption from severe mental illness would truly understand. Like, this is just quite a short, watered down version.
It really is. I mean, we're talking like, somebody who would talk to herself, but talk to the devil, talk about the devil, talk
and
to other spirits.
Not a nice, gentle mumbling.
No,
it would be
like
a full
severe swearing and carrying on. And then somebody who was also severely depressed, where she would stay in bed for days.
Yeah.
And she would cry a lot. I mean, the incidents that did happen, they weren't mild.
No, like marriage breakdown, family breakdown, you know, work, life stress, everything, raising children. So, I think she did what she had, you know, with the tools that she had.
Yeah.
So I think, the tribute to her is, you know, we made it out okay.
We did, yes.
And she'd be just so proud of us. So I think that's the only way that we can really honour her. And I think she would be absolutely chuffed that we've, you know, chosen to speak about her. You know,
most
never ever thinking she'd be the topic of conversation at this on this platform. Yeah. So I think, she would just be... I'm sure she's skiting wherever she is.
Yeah, those are my girls. Yeah, absolutely. And so proud of all her grandchildren as well. You know, like just the hardships that she's endured, and just seeing that.
And I think we do forget. You know, we forget. You know, what was her purpose was to get here. You know, in Aotearoa, make a better life, and all of that, and when she's remembered, it's just for that, you know, the tough period of your life. So if we go back and think, no, hopefully we've honoured what her true, you know, vision was when she first ever
came to New Zealand.
So hopefully that we've done that. Yeah,
I think so.
Thank you.